Whoops. Jack's always unmuted.
Yeah, that's true. No filter problem in life.
Over to the chair.
Well, how about, since it was awkward this morning, how about the vice chair from the room, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to call the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District meeting to order and begin by recognizing that the meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation, and we have some folks calling in. And if you take a moment to recognize whose traditional territory you are calling in from today. I'll move to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Crumpton. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a closed meeting? No, we do not have a closed meeting today. Good thing I didn't miss that agenda. And so we will move on, no rise and report, to item number 5. We do have a delegation today from Vancouver Coastal Health on their 2024 multi-year capital plan and cost share request. And so we do have folks in the waiting room, and we'll just bring them in and have them present. Hi there, folks. Welcome. I see Belinda and Christina, Johan. Is there anybody else from your team that we're waiting for?
I think Ira will be joining, Ira Ronas, and I see I'm coming up as Christina, but it's Heidi Butler.
Hi, Heidi.
There's several of us that are Christina's here at this meeting.
All right, wonderful. Well, I will pass it over to you to introduce your team and kick us off with the presentation here, and then we'll leave some time for questions at the end.
Great, would love to. Thanks. So thanks so much for having us. My name is Heidi Butler, and I'm the director for the Sea to Sky with Vancouver Coastal. In my portfolio is acute care services, peri-op, and home health. And I am joined by a few colleagues. I'll pass it over to introduce themselves. Belinda, can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belinda Graham. I'm the acting executive director for the planning and projects for facilities for the coastal region. Nice to meet you all. Johan? Oh, Johan, you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. There we go. Johan Marais, Regional Director, Capital Planning, VCH and PHC. Thank you for having us.
Nicole, do you want to?
Sure, thank you. I'm Nicole Adams. I'm the communications leader for Coastal Community of Care, and support Sea to Sky is one of my portfolios.
And I see Erica there.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just trying to get off mute. It's Erica Simpson, unlike the tag there says. Christina and I make up the external relations team here at Vancouver Coastal Health, and just here to listen and learn, and lovely to see you all.
Right. And I think Ira Ronas will be joining us. He's the director of mental health and substance use for Sea to Sky and North Shore. He should be joining us shortly. So I do apologize, I'm not there in person today. I intended to be, but I've got a bit of a head cold and didn't want to share that with you. But I would like to acknowledge that I am calling in today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish First Nations, and that VCH is grateful to provide care on territories of 14 First Nations in BC. Thanks for having us here to discuss capital planning for your acute sites. This is the first time I have met the whole board, although I think I have met a few of you in other meetings. So I did want to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a resident of Squamish, and I've lived here since 2014. Prior to joining VCH, I led a province-wide BC transplant donation team, and my background is as a registered nurse. Most of my bedside nursing career was spent in the intensive care unit and in education. I joined VCH back in February, and I work regularly out of Squamish General Hospital, but also frequent Whistler Health Center and the Pemberton Health Center. Johan has a great presentation for us, but before we get to that, I did want to share a few updates for you and just acknowledge that really the healthcare system has faced a lot of challenges in the last few years. and the impacts of COVID-19 still remain in our healthcare system. But there is a lot of important work that we're doing to respond to those challenges in the Sea to Sky. And some of that work looks at investing in our healthcare infrastructure, but I'd say most importantly, the people that operate and deliver the care in our facilities. So like other healthcare centers across Canada, which you're all hearing about, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton are also experiencing high volumes in our emergency departments. And this is related to pressures from ongoing pandemic recovery and some healthcare staffing issues. We are responding to these in a number of ways, and I'd like to highlight a few. So we are working with Pemberton and Squamish emergency departments to look at the triage areas, to work to identify some short-term renovations that we can do to improve the patient experience, safety, and flow through the departments. We have expanded our medical team capacity, adding some new physicians in Pemberton and also in Whistler. And in Pemberton, we are in the process of recruiting nurse practitioners that will be working out of the emergency department. We're really excited about this. It's new to the coastal community of care, and I think it will be really great to bring the expertise of nurse practitioners and physicians together to support that community. Of course, we are looking at medical imaging upgrades, and so there is a feasibility study for a Pemberton X-ray room that's currently being completed. And the CT scanner for Squamish Hospital, there is a business case that was completed and is moving positively through the approval process with the VCH board and the province. So we're looking forward to telling you more about that in the near future. Of course, in the Sea to Sky, lots of young families. So we are responding to the growing birthing population. We deliver a large number of babies for a small facility in Squamish, and we are looking to actively recruit 2 new obstetrician and gynecologists to support the maternity program that will no doubt continue to grow. We're also working to enhance some of the really important allied supports that we have in our hospital and across the Sea to Sky. So things like social work, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology. So we're looking at how we can expand these by changing rotations, adding new staff, really looking for full 7-day-a-week coverage, and looking to build capacity within the team. So doing some additional training for the staff that already work there, so they might be able to provide things like wound care 7 days a week. I'm really excited that I can announce officially as of this week, we have a dedicated manager for Whistler and Pemberton Health Center who will be on site and shared between both sites. So this is a new role that we've created. And previously, the manager for Whistler and Pemberton was based out of Squamish and really couldn't offer the level of support that they would have liked with such a large portfolio. So we're excited to announce that person shortly, and they'll be starting in November. I would also like to take a moment to talk about the very exciting master planning process. I'm sure you have all heard of this. So VCH is in the process of developing an integrated high-level master plan. It will take place over the next 18 months, and we're calling it Health Vision Sea to Sky. So you may have seen bulletins throughout the community with QR codes. We launched this back in June, and the first phase was external engagement process, which was several different engagement sessions with First Nations leaders, local governments, VCH staff, general public. We had a survey that we had roughly 1,400 people complete so far, and that survey is open until the end of September. We also met with representatives from your RHD back in June, and we want to sincerely thank you for your participation and feedback in that meeting. And so we're getting towards the end of phase 1. Our survey will close. There's some final engagement sessions, and we'll put all of that data into a report that we call What We Heard and make this available to the public in the late fall. Phase 2 is coming up after, and that is more engagement, and we'll be seeking input on a draft clinical services plan. Phase 3 will get into, what infrastructure do we now need to deliver these clinical services, and how can we plan out to 2050? So we appreciate working with you all to address what the hospital needs are and the needs for the community. And to that end, we would like to propose the creation of working groups with VCH and some of the RHD representatives so we can meet earlier and more regularly to talk about capital planning and discuss what the community needs are. So we'll be reaching out after this meeting to discuss this proposal further, but we're really looking forward to having more frequent and fulsome engagement with your team. So with that, I'll pass it over to Johan. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for the update. That's really helpful. There's lots of going on for sure, and that's helpful context for Johan's presentation.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Let me just do a screen share. Oh, somebody else is doing it for me. Great. Thank you. If we can, in the interest of time, because this is a quite lengthy presentation, so I'm going to be focusing on some of the key slides. So if we can move to slide 4, please. Thank you. Oops. Just one back. Thank you very much. The aim of this slide is just to outline the complexity of the capital plan environment, where we have a lot of rules that is specified in the center there, stakeholders that we engage, and capital pressures and principles that we abide by through delivering and drafting the capital plan on an annual basis. Slide 5, please. Capital planning principles at first is operational sustainability. So to maintain our facilities in such a state that we can provide the best possible patient outcomes. Through that, the asset condition, being the facility condition index, is at a really historic deficit in terms of that investment. We are doing whatever we can within the limited funding envelope that we have available to address some of this. As we are looking through the principles of capital planning, Indigenous health, planetary health, diversity, equity, and inclusion form a large part of what we do, how we prioritize, and the various reviews that is occurring as projects are moving through the approval stages. Can you move me to slide 7, please? Thank you. Just a quick overview on facilities. The major projects that is within the Sea to Sky region is the Hilltop House expansion, which is more looking like a replacement at the moment and not an expansion. The other piece that has been touched on here is just to emphasize that we are in the process of the Sea to Sky master site planning, and we continue to look at rural housing initiatives wherever possible, because housing is a critical piece, especially when it comes to our staffing. If you can move me to slide 9, please. Thank you. The overview on the equipment, when we look at it on an annual basis over the last couple of years, our average spend is around 42 million on clinical equipment. This slide at the bottom to your right is just showing the contribution that we are getting from hospital foundations. This is inclusive of all hospital foundations and auxiliaries across VCH. So it is a fundamental core piece of funding our clinical equipment, and we do appreciate that. If you can take me to slide 10, please. Thank you. On the IMED side, we are now nearing the end of the CST implementation, which should probably wrap up within the next year, year and a half. But the light blue at the top is the investment that we have been making in CST on an annual basis. And CST is our Clinical Systems Transformation Project, which is center-based, and that is our patient care system, which currently is rolling out at Richmond Hospital, UBC Hospital, and then we still have Powell River within the coastal COC area to do, and that will come towards the end of the implementation. To be able to deliver CST, we had to invest quite a bit in the infrastructure. That cost sits within the CST cost, as you see them here. That would be anything from data cables to core switches, edge switches, etc. Communications closets, all of it needed to be refreshed to get us ready for CST Cerner. Can you take me to slide 16, please? Thank you. We just want to focus in on specific to Sea2Sky. The projects that we are going to be talking about here are actually active. Slide 17, please. Thank you. This is the facilities projects that we currently have underway. Now, please keep in mind this excludes anything that was closed within the last couple of months or last year. It's all current and active. We showed it by funding source so that we can have an idea as to how much is contributed from each funding partner, and also specifically to highlight the contribution that is coming from you as the Sea2Sky board. The next slide, please. We have a relatively larger investment in our equipment projects at the moment with very little small projects. So there is the surgical video tower. That is a substantial one that is being funded by the foundation. And then the CareScape monitor systems, which is funded by the province. Those are the two big ticket items on the equipment list. On slide 19, slide 19 speaks to the projects that was approved. So just back one or two. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. This speaks to the projects that was approved in FY24 for coastal COC, and this was the approval against what is called our routine capital investment allocation that we receive from the ministry on an annual basis. And this is the spread of the projects. And then I'm going to go on to the cost share, which is slide 21. So I'm really excited, having been to your board for a number of years and having heard you talk about the CT scanner and how important this was to the community. So this is really exciting to see this project moving forward. We are looking at a $6.5 million project cost estimate at the moment for that CT scanner. And we are making a cost share request to you for that project. Secondly, the PIR washroom, that was a project that was presented to you before and was as such declined. We now have a need for additional funds for that washroom. The cost has gone up substantially. We are at $500,000 for that cost. So we are requesting whether there is a possibility that you will consider a contribution to the additional funds, although it was declined initially. So similarly for the paving and the drainage on the parking and the laneway, a project that was declined earlier, and we are just asking whether there's a possibility that you can support the additional funds, which would be a contribution of $100,000 towards that project from your board. We have two new projects. The bathing room upgrades at Hilltop House South. That is currently estimated at $660,000. It is a critical project that really needs to be done, despite the fact that we are looking at a future site. In the interim, we still have to live within the current. So we would like to have that upgraded to lift up the standard of care. And then lastly, we have a patient monitoring system that needs replacement as the Whistler Healthcare Center for approximately $400,000. So in total, with the CT scanner being the large driver within the cost share request, we are requesting in the range of around 3.2 million. So that leaves about 600,000 for our typical routine type of investments, as well as the equipment piece for the patient monitor. If you can take me to the next slide, please. This is addressing the upcoming capital priorities for Sea to Sky. And Belinda, if I can ask you to quickly just speak to these, please.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are the projects that we're currently in feasibility studies that we're not ready to come to the RHD for a cost share request, but we are just putting it on the horizon that these are upcoming for next year. So right now, Heidi did mention that we are in the feasibility study for a new X-ray for Pemberton, and it's coming at around $1.7 million. So we'll be confirming that in October or November when it's complete. We are also just started an optimization for the Squamish Emergency Department. And this is to address sightlines, clinical workflow. The triage is not exactly the right size. The waiting room is not sized properly, and we're trying to maximize the department. So we are in feasibility study as well. It just started a couple of weeks ago. Similarly, for Pemberton Emergency Department, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at the flow, the waiting room, how to optimize the bed, how do we make it more safe for the staff as well. And Heidi did mention the strategy to hire more obstetrics. So we are looking at renovating a obstetric clinic inside the Squamish General Hospital, actually inside Hilltop, where we found a space dedicated for this clinic. And we're just wrapping up the feasibility study for that as well. We are also having challenges getting our biomed staff recruited inside Squamish because we don't have a proper workspace. So biomed staff is a dedicated staff that works on all the medical imaging and patient monitoring equipment, anything equipment related that are clinical equipment they work on. And so we're trying to renovate a space dedicated for them so that they can have a place to serve the Sea to Sky region. Some of the infrastructure projects that are coming up are to replace the entire HVAC equipment inside Pemberton. We also want to replace the generator, the dying generator in Squamish, as well as the boiler, and also fix the cooling inside the medical device reprocessing department, and also to address the building management system inside Squamish. So these are some of the projects that we're currently working on that we will make a request for next year's cost share. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. If you can skip us forward, maybe 2 slides. Thank you. This is just an outline of the FY24 planning process. At the time when this presentation was put together, FY25 was not published. So the timeline is very similar. And I think what I just want to reiterate here, that we have initiated the project intake process for this year. We are looking to have it wrapped up by December with endorsement from our CEO and CFO. And then in January, we'll be working, tabling this at our senior executive table and then on to the board for approval. On the next slide, thank you. Very quickly, this is the criteria that we look at when we are prioritizing a project, whether it be facilities, clinical equipment, or IMETs. And then the next slide, which I think is nearing us to the end of the presentation, is a quick overview of our process for facilities. And that is followed by a slide that speaks briefly to the equipment prioritization process. Very, very similar in terms of the process, slightly different in terms of how it's scored. But at the end of the day, we are working towards one final date in January of 2024. With that, that concludes my presentation to you. And thank you very much for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for the presentation. It is very exciting to see the CT scanner in there. That is hugely encouraging. And also appreciate the helpful insights into what's coming up next in the kind of foreseeable capital plan that helps us with our kind of budget considerations and allocation. I just want to confirm that this is a little bit different in the process and the timeline than we've done this in the past. We typically see you further down in the budgeting process. We're here mostly on the first part of that timeline that you presented, which is the request for submission. So doing a check-in on what those priorities are and if there's anything that we would like to see elevated or get feedback on what those submissions are, but it's not necessarily a decision for budget today. Just want to clarify that. So I'll open it up to the board if there's any questions for our delegation. Yeah, go ahead, Director Rainbow.
How did we get from 260,000 to 510,000 for a washroom? What have we gold-plated taps or something, or what did we do there?
Hi, Director Rainbow, I can answer that. So when we came for the initial request, it was the feasibility study was done over 2 years ago. And so when we had to pause to come for the first ask, which was denied, so we actually had to keep pausing to wait for the next RCI intake to ask for your missing portion, at which time we continued design to a class C, but then the escalation in the market of 2022 was astronomical, especially in Squamish. And so we had to do a few clinical changes to our specs, which meant we couldn't let them we couldn't let the contractor work during any time. They only had to work during nighttime. And this is the post-recovery of operation patients. So we had to respect the clinical need for only overtime work, which was only nighttime. So that created the bid to be even more astronomical than we expected. And unfortunately, that was the market in 2022 when we got the revised pricing.
Thank you for that context.
Thank you. I think I should be looking that way if I'm talking to people, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Rather than that way. Yeah.
We'll go to Director Pettingill next.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious. I saw your planetary health planning principle, and I'm wondering what that means in terms of, it's talked about generators and boilers and that sort of thing. Is VCH moving away from gas and fossil infrastructure on these sorts of things? We've started to move like that in Squamish, and I'm just wondering where VCH is on that aspect of things.
So I think to address your question, when we are looking at new builds, definitely there is an opportunity. For example, we are planning to add a new tower to Richmond Hospital. That will every piece of it will be electrical. So there will not be anything else, no gas, no fuel on that site. We do have an initiative around the carbon neutral offset, where we get that what is called the CNCP allocation from the ministry. Those projects aim to reduce carbon offsets, and each one of those projects are supported. But in general, we are trying where we can within the funding that we have available to address planetary health as a whole. Thank you, sir.
Good question. Any further questions for our delegation? Yeah, Director Crompton, then Director Rainbow.
Thanks for the presentation. As you know, Ms. Murray, our approach has been to view funds held by the hospital district as tools to promote local health priorities.
Yes.
And because we see healthcare as a provincial and federal responsibility, so the basics should be provided through the provincial and federal government. I wonder, I would have expected that things like washrooms and bathing rooms are the basics, are part of the basics of healthcare. And I wonder why those priorities are being held up by a lack of funding from ourselves. It would seem to me those are priorities that should be met by VCH.
Yeah, I think what is occurring there is that you know, when we received the decline, that has put it kind of like at the point in time when we distribute the funds to the projects, there is no leftover, so we couldn't accommodate anything else within the plan, and we had to kind of like shift it off by a year. At this point in time, to get to the core of your question, we are still looking at your support for the infrastructure projects as well. They are key in delivering the services at the end of the day.
Would you like to know more about those projects, Director Compton?
No, I that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Rainbow.
Yeah, again, thanks for the presentation. At some point you mentioned, talked about Hilltop House and the renovation shifting to perhaps a replacement. So my question is, does that mean a completely new building on a new site? And if that's the case, what impact will that have on the hospice, which is connected?
So right now we do have our business case with the ministry to relocate the existing Hilltop to a new greenfield site. So it will not be at the Squamish General Hospital. And we are also putting in hospice bed as well in that project.
The last part?
We are looking at putting new hospice beds as well at the new greenfield site. So our new master plan that is currently underway will look at what we'll do with the existing site that's remaining on Hilltop.
Thank you.
And I just have one question following on from Director Crompton's question. Is it helpful for your budgeting process if you know in advance where we are unlikely to support the requested budget? So is that something from what I understand is that you then put in your budgets assuming that you'll get the requested funding from the hospital district? Given that we now have this new process that brings these requests a little bit earlier on, is it helpful for you for your budgeting process to get that information back from us that we are really unlikely to support something that seems operational in nature?
That will be very helpful, yes. Yep.
Good to know.
I think I want to ask you that question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Director Rainbow.
If this new site comes about and the hospice is moved, you know, we spend a lot of money on the exterior, on the garden, the pagoda and things like that. And would you undertake to replacing those things in the new site? Or would it just be the building you're shifting?
Our new redevelopment will also address any landscaping, any green gardens, for example, because that was also part of our long-term care guidelines to provide a patient experience for the long-term residents and the hospice residents. So we have beautiful garden, rooftop gardens, access to green space for the residents.
What is the timeline on this?
It won't be for a few years. We're still in ministry approval. So I can't really dovetail into more details until we get ministry approval, including the timelines, because it is subject to their approvals first.
Thanks very much.
Any further questions for the delegation? Thank you again so much for being here. We'll take our time to deliberate and we'll send a response in writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Are we? We are live.
We are live.
And then we,
We are live.
I'll let you drive. I'm like, I don't know what's.
So I do want to just provide a little bit of time to discuss amongst us the delegation we just had, knowing that we are earlier in our budget approval than typically. So we do have Director LaFrance here who might be able to speak to how much money we have in the budget. But from what I heard is that it would be helpful if there's anything on that list that we definitely aren't willing to put money forward, that we could provide that in writing to them to inform their budget process. And the other side of that is like things that we're super enthusiastic about, that they're finally in the budget. So if anybody has any specific comments, or I might just pop it over to Director LaFrance first to see if she has that overall budget number of how much is in the regional hospital district budget. Sorry to put you on the spot.
So no, I did some preliminary review. So currently we have 2,074,000 unallocated in the reserve. That was mainly due to about $1 million being placed into the reserve this year. And then in 2024, potentially without any increase to taxation dollars, I'm not looking at any rates or anything, just dollar to dollar from 2023 to 2024, we would put an additional $1,173,000. So that total pocket would then be for 2024, $3,247,000, which would cover everything. And that's without any taxation increase at all. On average, a 10% taxation increase, just dollar to dollar, would give $150,000 additional funding for capital.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for having those numbers. That's helpful. Director Compton.
A reminder of what their ask is? Is it like exactly that number?
3.223.
Yeah.
It's like Director Richmond.
Suzanne, you say unallocated. Did we put money specifically away for the CT scanner, or is that included in the reserve?
There wasn't any resolution yet to allocate any of that balance.
Yeah, thank you. So my quick comments, having been part of this conversation all these years about what we should fund and shouldn't. Our last couple of years, we said we wouldn't fund anything until the master plan process was in place. It started, we know that, which is good. I think we're all pretty positive about the CT scanner. My brain does the same thing when I see washrooms. I go, that's drainage and paving. It's like, that's so operational. I do want to make a comment though, which is, we've played hardball with BCH over the last few years. They do have limited funding that comes to them. We do want to set up good services and locations and all that. So I'm just asking us, like, our line has been, you know what, operational, forget about it, nothing, forget about everything until we have the master plan. So even if we're moving ahead and going CT and this and that, I'm just saying, we do know that they do have their own budget problems to deal with. if we, but bathrooms and paving seems out of our purview, but if we want to see some of the things done, we might have to swallow some of that at some point.
If I could follow on that, Mike.
Sorry, I have Director Pettingill and then we'll continue. Go ahead, Director Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. Do we have policy or is it our practice that we would conceivably spend all the money we have to match their ask, or do we usually keep some level of something in our reserve?
I'll let Director LaFrance speak to our reserve policy if we have one.
Yep, there is no reserve policy for the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District. All of our funds go into the capital reserve and we use them as per the board's resolution. But there's no specific rules around what we want to keep as a reserve versus a spend.
Okay, thank you.
I have Director Rainbow, Director Compton, and Director Herford.
Yeah, I just want to follow on what Mike was saying. We have played hardball with them. They've come in here at the last minute and said we want this, and we've said no, thank you, go away. What I see in this, or what I heard in this presentation, is a softening from them. Certainly the timing is much better. And if you look at the percentages, $500,000 for a washroom, which I still don't understand, they're asking now for 100,000 rather than 40%, which is what they were doing before. So that's not 40%, is it? It's 20%. So they've kind of shifted a bit. And I understand what Jack's saying, but I'd be able to shift towards them as well and soften our approach of it.
Director Compton.
I think the decision on the CT scanner demonstrates the wisdom of our approach to this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's given us money in our bank account to say, we think this is important, and then have them join us and us be able to rise to 2 million plus in an investment that really matters. And so I just, like, the federal and provincial government need to do drainage and washrooms. I cannot for the life of me bring myself to vote for picking up those kind of things, mainly because we just saw the success of our approach in a really important way for our whole region. We're gonna have a CT scanner as a result, and I'm excited about it. We've been asking for years. And the same thing happened in Whistler with the trauma room. And with the trauma room expansion. So
we fund the majority then?
Of the trauma room expansion, yeah. But
We
We
fund
did
it.
in the hospital.
yeah, but I'm saying that's we had resources to do that work. And if I just think the idea that we'll have $3.2 million in our bank, and they just came and asked for $3.2 million. It's stunning. Yeah.
I'll go to Director Herford.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that their ask matches our funds available, which is unlikely to be a coincidence. I'm curious about sort of the future asks, and as we look at our ability to participate as we're being asked in those future pieces, like just understanding what that looks like. Like if we go right to zero right now, which I'm not inclined to do, and based from there, the easiest things to step back from are the paving and the washroom, although I do appreciate the lower percentage, which I do see as being a lower ask, although there's just been straight up cost escalation. We've been asked the same dollar for dollar amount we were previously, but that's maybe more than semantics. So how do those I'd like to understand how those next asks sort of add up, so we can look at this in some sort of budget forecasting piece. Like, do we need to hold on to that $200,000 that we're stepping back from to be able to fully participate in those future asks? And I wasn't able to do that quick math during the presentation or in my review of this till we get here. So I wonder if we need to provide that final guidance right now, and maybe we're ready to, or whether we have that month space to have a bit of a look and see what that future ask looks like in relation to our future revenue, and if we need to make an adjustment to sort of meet all those needs rather than looking at this as the one-off as it's been presented.
So I have myself on the list and I'll just respond to that quickly. I think the reality is that they don't have a fully fleshed out 5-year capital plan. The process that they go through is slow. They were able to give us some insight on some big ticket items that are coming next year, 1.7 million for X-ray in Pemberton, which I know has been a huge priority for the corridor as well. My general sentiment is that property taxation is not the right mechanism to support operational things that should really be covered by the province and the federal government. So while I appreciate wanting to give them a bit of something, I think we can still continue to hold strong and say we are really grateful that the CT scanner is in there. We have been able to plan for that. We have money in our budget. We look forward to continuing to work on substantial capital investments within the corridor that will be informed by over the next 2 years and the master plan process, and we will continue to save for those. But wanting to make sure that we have money in our budget that will allow us to do that, as opposed to draining what's there and jacking up our property tax rates, which are the only mechanisms that we have to deliver this sort of funding. Director Richmond and Director Rainbow. And Director
So yeah, I would support that, you know, even given my comments that I led with, which again, with Tony, I've softened a little bit. I know, and I empathize a little bit with their struggles, but I totally hear what you're saying with regards to property taxes and the operational expenses, but I will also be very reluctant as part of this board to increase our tax rate for the health board, recognizing that most of our communities are going to be seeing large tax increases elsewhere. We did some aggressive increases 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 years ago. We did some pretty aggressive increases, which successfully built our reserves, puts us in this good place to be able to help finance the CT scanner. So it will take some convincing to get me to 1% tax rate. If the board feels that we want to protect some of our reserves, then I would support Jenna's line of thought.
Okay, I'll go to Director Rainbow, then Director Pettingill, then Director Crompton, then we're going to wrap this conversation.
Yeah, so presumably if we feel that way about the washroom and the paving, probably should include the bathing room upgrades in that as well. Similar kind of thing, isn't it? So we'd look at those 3 things. Patient monitoring system, I'm not quite sure what that is. Is that IT? Is that software?
Very operational.
Yeah, so I think the suggestion that I've heard is that we go ahead with funding with a letter that would support funding the CT scanner. And we say, thank you for continuing to invest in operations and your own facilities for the remainder of the items.
Can I just finish? But it's something else I'd really like to address later, if that's okay.
Director Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. I do sort of wonder, I think the idea of not funding operational still, despite all the softening, makes sense to me because we don't know what's coming the rest of the capital plan. We're talking about using everything we have on this current ask and then what comes out of the capital planning soon. And is there something, you know, that we really should be funding that we no longer have money for? So that's a question for me. The bathing room seems odd. I think I heard them say they're planning on relocating Hilltop, not tomorrow, but in the near future. So is this 660,248 from us? Does that make sense? Is the bathing room that urgent an issue? And just on Hilltop, I have a question. You know, I think in Squamish, when we're looking at Brennan Park, Municipal Hall renewals, we're thinking about, hey, can we use the airspace above for affordable housing and so on? I'm not sure if that's a conversation for this body to have, or if that's as a regional district, we open sort of an additional conversation. And my mind is sort of wondering about that sort of thing as they raise the idea of a different new building for Hilltop. It sounds like I don't know what the time frame is, but something we may want to think about where we have that conversation.
Yeah, that's a helpful flag. It's something that we continue to bring up through the master planning process, and BCH they mentioned it briefly, their rural housing strategy, which actually doesn't include any of our communities, but we continue to argue that it should. But more specifically on that Hilltop piece, we'll see if there's an opportunity to bring that through the hospital district. I think that's a good flag. Don't have a specific solution right now, but thanks for flagging it. Director Crompton.
Just a question for Director LaFrance. Are we required to spend our money with VCH? I seem to remember we spent with Under One Roof or some non-VCH connected entity in the past?
The rules around what we can spend are basically capital funds for any designated hospital center, so including medical clinics and things like that. So it has to be a registered hospital institution with the minister, and we can fund that with our own funding. It just has to be for capital.
So like a safe, like a
Safe injection site.
safe injection site would qualify?
If it's a registered hospital facility with the
And under
minister.
one roof, how did under one roof satisfy the rate, or did it?
Go ahead, Director Herford, if you know the answer.
I'm gonna take a stab at the answer. I'm open to someone else has more, but they have, under one roof does have medical facilities there where, which I know, I'm sure VCH participates in, but also local doctors and so on. So they have some health. There's a very clear healthcare piece there, so they likely meet the definition.
Okay, so thank you. My comments are twofold. One, that's exciting for me, the opportunity to continue to look at what's really emerging as important things for our community and invest in those places. And I think that this is like a super significant investment that this body's about to make. $2.6 million shouldn't be understated. So I think the letter that we're writing back is we're excited to contribute enthusiastically and look forward to doing more of the same in the future. Because I don't see this as sort of a limited investment. It's significant, it's important, and it'll benefit our region.
So that's a motion to write a letter to BCH to support the
CT scanner.
the cost share request for the CT scanner.
Yeah.
Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Rainbow. Any further comments? I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have the consent agenda, which just has approval and receipt of minutes, moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Richmond. Any comments? Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Not seeing any staff reports, no verbal. No report. There is a chair's verbal report around Vancouver Coastal Health Working Group representatives, and I am a stand-in chair, but I don't have the details.
Make it up.
Make it up. Go. Say something.
I do have an email to that effect. I do not have it handy. There was a discussion about whether there was, I think 2 representatives were going to be appointed towards on the working group. Do you have it there? 2 representatives from both organizations to participate in this group, which is a working group between BCH and the regional hospital district. And they just wanted to let us know if 2 people had been appointed that.
2 people from this committee.
Yeah, and then 2 from BCH.
This board.
Not fully knowing the details, but I think I may have been involved in a call.
I think there was a previous meeting held sort of early summerish. It might have been a little bit earlier.
That would, yeah.
We can defer this and take it offline and circle.
Okay, that would be good, just so we know the full context of what we're actually referring to.
Yeah.
Motion to
defer. Moved, seconded by Director Richmond. All in favor? Motion carries. Any decision on late business? Yes. Director Rainbow.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily discuss this right now, but I want to raise it. As you know, I volunteer with the Hospice Society, and that's the first I'd heard of the possible move like that, and that has tremendous implications. And so I'd like for us to discuss it at some point and to make a representation to VCH to be included, to include the people that volunteer, the board of the hospice included in that whole process of movement. And also I asked them about the garden. We spent, we being area C and area D, have spent $75,000 on beautifying that whole house, including the new totem pole, and if they're going to move in 2 or 3 years, I want them to undertake that. One, they'll provide a really good garden. 2, that they'll move the gazebo, which was built by volunteer labor, and 3, that they'll go through whatever process needs to be gone through to move that totem pole. That's all that. And then my other question is, what happens to that building? You know, the hospice part of the building is beautiful, and no way should that be pulled down. No. So what are their plans for it? What would it be used for? And along with that, the actual long-term care part of it, could that be adapted and changed into some kind of housing? You know, or is the building such that it couldn't possibly happen? I don't know.
Yeah, so appreciate that there's lots of questions to unpack in there. We are deep into this agenda, and I think that there's answers that we're not going to have around the table today.
No, I just wanted to
And
raise that
so,
as an issue that we can deal with later.
Yeah, and my suggestion would be maybe go back to the Hospice Society and see if anybody else has heard about this. It definitely hasn't been, BCH has talked about it in the past, and so, and then we can work with the chair on bringing this forward in the next agenda and get BCH back for some further discussion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we could just to Tony's direction, we could send a letter, and we can do this at the next meeting, it's fine, but maybe put on flag it for the next agenda, that we could put a letter to BCH saying we would like early consultation on that project.
Or we'd just like to know what's going on. Like, can you give us information?
Requesting an update on
I've
this.
been involved, as you stated, so.
All right, any director notice motion?
Just for clarity on that one, did you want a letter to go out asking for more information coming at the next agenda, or do you want to discuss this at the next agenda?
Personally, I think they're a long ways away from making any moves on that. They've got more immediate priorities. So I would say let's put it as an agenda item for a little bit more discussion on the next meeting. And to me, the results coming out of that will be a letter to BCH saying, hey, we want you to make sure that you're informing us every step of the way what's going on this.
And just for your information, I won't be at the next meeting, but my alternate, Leslie DeBee, is the executive director for the hospice board. So she'll be well qualified to speak to them.
Is that the clarity you need? Okay. Any directors notice a motion? Seeing none, move adjournment. Moved by Director Herford, second by Director Compton, all in favor. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.